So it's recording.
We're live.
Oh, I guess we should. We should probably do one together. How about this one?
Cool. That's not gonna
Anyway, so yeah, Office Hours episode 3. Wow, here we are. Really interesting conversation with Dr. Rasbury. I took away a lot. It's been really cool to hear what she has had to offer, especially like since I'm learning a lot about clinical psychology and like mental health and parenting. So yeah, it was a really cool conversation. What did you think about it?
I loved it. I mean, there's so many things to take away. And one thing that I really was feeling while we were doing the interview was how much applies to anybody, right? Like they are very specific and super important in the adoption framework, but everybody should be trying to do a lot of the things, like a lot of what she was talking about was empathy and putting yourself in other people's shoes and not making assumptions about people's situations and letting your guard down and putting some of your own personal issues aside and like caring for somebody else. Like that's a lot of what everybody needs. So I really loved a lot of the stuff we talked about. I thought it was super, super important. So yeah, I'm excited to kind of break some of this down.
Yeah. And I think what you're already hitting on is that CPR model, which is really cool. And like you're saying, I think it can be widely applied. Consistency, predictability, and reliability.
Reliability, yeah.
And those things, yes, I think they're really important for like trauma work, and like adoption and foster care. But yes, those types of values can just be applied to any type of situation.
Yeah.
And
I mean, especially when people's emotions are involved, right? Like a consistent, predictable, reliable framework in somebody's life to like be able to handle and manage their emotions and to help somebody manage and handle their emotions, I think is really important. I think it's very easy to feel lost or, isolated when you don't have a consistent, predictable, reliable framework for handling your emotions. And I think, like you're saying, that's a really good framework just in general.
Yeah. And I really like attachment theory in psychology. And that literally is the basis for like a caregiver-child relationship in the first early years of their life is this caregiver going to be responsive consistently? Is that response going to be empathic? Is it going to be catered towards their needs and not directly what the caregiver needs? So all these things, all these parenting tips, all these relational tips were just so helpful. And
it's funny because even as you're saying that now, and I had been thinking about this after, but like raising a puppy is really a similar process, right? Like you have to put your needs for the dog before the needs of yourself, because unlike a child, the dog's never going to be able to communicate with you. So this idea of consistent, predictable, and reliable in the dog training, not even training, just like creating a predictable environment, like that is communication to the dog. It's the physical cues that you give the dog. It's verbal sounds, but it's not necessarily words. And, having raised the dog in the last 2 years from an 8-month-old puppy to now, I mean, I learned that real quick, right? Like everything is your fault, everything. And if you can accept the fact that everything's your fault, then you know that everything's also in your control. And that's super important, because if it's in your control, you can do something about anything. The dog chews your shoe. You left your shoe out. The dog, chews the couch. Well, you let the dog have access to that couch. This can be reworked for any scenario with a dog. You could have done something different. If you know your dog's not ready to be in a room yet, crate train, put in a different room, find a new space for them, dog proof your everything. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's 100% on the dog owner to do everything.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's, I kind of made a joke, like it was a bit of a crude example, but it's really relevant.
It's very true.
And, I think kind of back to the theory. What was the theory you were just talking about called again?
Attachment theory.
Attachment theory, right? Like, you've got to be ready to put those needs of the animal, the child, whatever it is, before your own. And if you can do that, then, I think you're going to build a relationship that's got a lot of that those CPR qualities in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think I always think about the distinction between like teaching and fear. Because, right, a dog messes up, they chew your shoe, you could blame them and like get really mad. And so maybe they're fearful that they'll never do that again. But like, what does that create? Right. Mm-hmm. And it goes for the same for a child. I feel like you can yell at them because they did something wrong, get really angry. Maybe they won't do that again because they're scared to do that again. But yeah, what does that do to them? Like, is it, I don't think it's teaching them. It's telling them that something's wrong with you because you did this, instead of saying, hey, maybe you didn't understand. I'm going to help you understand. And from here on out, like, you're going to have a better knowing way of going about this,
Yeah.
So that, I think that distinction I think it's becoming more clear as we move more towards teaching instead of like physical punishment, Mm-hmm. I know there's still people who really abide by like corporal punishment in different cultures. But I think it is becoming more clear that like teaching is a way to help people understand rather than like just enforcing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's super true, right? Like, I think, to your point, there's a really clear difference between, the physical, showing somebody physically what they did wrong in terms of like corporal punishment, like you're talking about. I mean, and this has been something that we've learned, but it's generational, right? Like, mm-hmm. 3 generations ago, you got the belt. Like, that was just what happened. Mm-hmm. But now it's like, okay, maybe, like, I think we underestimated the intelligence of children for a long time. Mm. They get it. You can explain why not to do something, and a kid is going to get it. They may not do it right next time, because at a certain point too, like, innate curiosity of a child is going to be like to test things and push the boundaries and get that response back from their environment. And I think, the more and more I've been thinking about our conversation, I'm like, I really think that letting your children go out and like do things, fail on their own, and just being that like emotional support type of a thing is like really a really valuable tool that a lot of people could benefit from, right? Mm-hmm. Like, the simple example is like, when a young child is putting their pants on for the first time, you don't have to step in and help them every time. Mm-mm. They'll figure it out, and then you'll be there for them if they figure it out wrong, and you'll show them, and you can show them, and they'll learn and they'll figure it out. But, just specifically on the punishment side, kids can be explained to, mm-hmm. and they'll understand.
Yeah.
And I think we have to be more willing to let them be told and fail again the exact same way, and then be told again. And you just have to be there to be that reminder. Mm-hmm. Even when it frustrates you, you have to, like we were talking about, put yourself aside.
Yeah.
It's not about you. Like, there's a very distinct way that humans learn this stuff. Mm-hmm. And you have to be willing to change your way of doing things to cater to the way that the child needs it.
Yeah. And I think that's where this consistency piece comes in, and that's where the challenging piece comes in. That kids definitely hear everything you say. sometimes they don't listen. And that's where your patience, I feel like, gets tested as a parent. I can't speak from personal experience as a
Yeah,
parent,
of course.
but yeah, that's in my experience in working with kids. I think that that's something that comes up, is that like, I maybe they're distracted, maybe they're jumping around doing different things, maybe they're really not paying attention to me, but I know that they're like hearing what I'm saying and they're processing it and they're taking it in, because if I ask something probably 5 minutes later, like they know exactly what I'm talking about. But there, yeah, there's just that tendency that they want to experiment. They want to do stuff their own way sometimes. And so I think this is exactly what Dr. Rasbury was talking about, in that setting high expectations for specifically maybe a child who's experienced a lot of trauma and you're going to be adopting this child, can really be dangerous for that environment, because you have these high expectations. This doesn't happen the way you expect it to. Things are just so different, and it can be a very hectic situation. And I think that applies to parenting in general. But that consistent, predictable, reliable source is something that I think sounds amazing and is really hard in practice.
Super hard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is, it's tough. And I think, like we were saying, I think that's why I really appreciate the work that she was doing, like preparing parents for this, actively working with parents throughout like the first couple years or a couple months of having a kid and one of their children now in their home, because that adaptation is so difficult.
Yeah.
But like, I don't know, I feel like sometimes there's not enough being done about parenting. Like,
yeah, for sure.
Teaching parenting. I had a professor in college that, like, every class, he would like come up here and he would talk. It was a human development class, and so it was about psychology and parenting. And every class, it was, I don't know why the hell there isn't a parent university. Like, if you're going to be parent, you should have to go to like 4 years of school. And I was like, damn, yeah, that makes sense.
Well, and like if you have never been exposed to another type of parenting, you're probably not going to do a different style of parenting, right? Mm-hmm. If you're familiar with, the corporal punishment model of parenting, you're going to do it. And if you're not exposed to strategies for controlling yourself, not necessarily strategies for helping a child, but you need to like be able to see your child messing up and not react in a explosive manner. And I feel like that's really difficult for a lot of people, So yeah, I'm super, super glad that we do it for parents who are adopting, but every parent could use it for sure.
Oh yeah. Right.
Yeah, there's so much more we could do. And again, it's funny because we're talking about parenting, but this is about developing capable children, right? Mm-hmm. It's not about creating better parents, even though that's the way to do it. It's about how are we setting the next generations up to be better than we were. And I think that's what every parent really wants at the end of the day, right? Like they want to set their child out into the world so that they can, function highly in society. Mm-hmm. And I forget where I heard it, but there was somebody doing some kind of a talk, and they were talking about, like we say, like raising children. And they said that like you don't raise a child. Child's going to grow on their own, whether you're there or not. But instead of thinking of yourself as a farmer of children, you're more of a shepherd of children. So you're not tending the soil, you're not bringing the water, you're not the sun necessary for these. But the shepherd moves the child in a direction, right? And helps, they're going to get the food out on the pasture that they need. They're going to get the nutrients that they need. But I really like that. I think it's because it removes the feeling of being in control as a parent, and kind of relinquishing some of that control to the environment. And this isn't a discussion about, nurture versus nature, but I think there's a lot of benefits from taking an approach with anything. Specifically, my context is like the dog thing, but how do I show this living thing, how to properly behave in the environment, not in a I'm mad or I'm happy way, but just in like a matter of fact, right? Like, this is not how we do that. This is how we do that. And I think that's a very refreshing take on maybe an older verbiage that is used on parenting.
No, I think that's a really cool way to think about it. It's like the shepherd's leading them to the appropriate food, to the places where they might get the best sunlight, the best water, but those things are there, right? Yeah, I think that's so true.
And I think it also is a very enabling style of doing it, to where like you're allowing decision and failure to happen, right? Like, it's funny. I remember growing up, there was a kid who I know in a family that I know of who like accidentally touched something really hot and like got a massive burn on their hand. And it was like, I just imagine like how from a young child, like doing those types of things, I think everybody's done it, right? Where like a baby like touches something hot, and then like we learn those things that way, right? There's an input. We figure out in our brain, okay, don't do that. Or when you start to feel that, know that you don't want to do it. And then you make an adjustment. And I feel like we have to let our children, I mean, granted, there's like a life or death component to this, but like climb the tree, right? Like run too fast in a slippery area. Not maybe, okay, maybe that's one of those life or death ones that we want to be cautious of, but like you get the point, right? Like let them try and fail and just show them that that's okay.
Fail forward.
Yeah. And it's like, well, are you not going to try now? Because no, like, let's get it, right? Let's do it. There's that video that's so popular on YouTube of the little boy and the dad who's trying to jump on that stool and fails probably 30 times and then gets it and is jacked. And it's like, it's such a cool video. And I think because overcoming something like that and failing so many times and still trying is like, God, that's what it's all about,
It is. Yeah. It's so, as we're thinking about this, God, everything's so complex, because I completely agree with what you're saying. And then my mind's running to these different places about like parenting support, youth support. And it's like some people go through some really difficult experiences, and these resources, like there are so many people that Dr. Rasbury wasn't able to work with. And people who like she worked with weren't able to reach out to or weren't able to connect with. And those people are really struggling, And so it's like, God, there's parents that are struggling. You can't just blame them. Then there are the kids that are struggling, and you can't just blame. And it's like, is our education system doing a good enough job of informing us about how to be a parent? Is that more of a sole responsibility on us to like go out and learn ourselves, read books? I think there's definitely a piece of that, but like if I wasn't in the field of psychology to where I had to take classes about like development and learn about empathy and learn about different stages of just like mental health and what's going on, like, I don't know.
You may not have been as exposed to it as you are.
No. And so I would think that maybe just brushing the surface of this would be sufficient. But now that I know that there's so much more to it, like I'm able to dive deeper into these layers of understanding different stages of development, understanding more about like pregnancy and all these different factors that go into that. But if I wasn't,
Yeah. And I think to your point, there's people who are going to seek out this type of information, right? And those people find it and they tend to be able to do something about it. But there's the people who don't know that they don't know.
yeah,
And it's that mindset of like, how do you get those people to be exposed to it so that they can do better? Because you're right, they're going to go through hard times at some point. There's going to be difficulties. And if they don't know that this type of like research and work is being done, they also won't know that there's a resource out there for them to go find it to better impact themselves and their children's lives. So how do you get in front of those people, I think, is the big question.
yeah,
And how do we make this, I think you were also even alluding to this, is like, how do we get this ingrained in our culture and society to the fact that it's not so foreign to so many people? Is it in the school system? Is it, do schools need to put a mandatory parental coaching session one time a month from kindergarten through 5th grade? I don't know. Maybe there's one when you're a freshman in high school on how to deal with high school stresses.
something.
There could be something. I mean, right? If we could just bake it into the education system, it seems like the natural environment to make it happen. But yeah, I don't know.
Or like high schools can implement like a parenting support group, or like parenting education. I mean, maybe that's out of their scope, and I know like teachers and have all.
And you
this.
can't compel a parent to have to show up, right?
No,
and there's
but
going to be a lot that
offering
don't,
it, right?
Yeah,
Like,
but again, offering it, the people who want it are going to be the ones who take it,
Damn
and
it.
the ones who don't are going to be the ones who just ignore it.
so we force everybody
Dictatorship.
through corporal punishment. But no, right? This goes back to the federal budget only giving education like 1%.
But I mean, even if the budget was through the roof, like you're still going to have parents who don't want to do it.
Yes. So what do you do about that? This is where extra resources through
I think
like other go ahead.
I was just going to say,
This is complex.
I think in my opinion, something that can be done is you need to better prepare children for breaking the cycle. Don't try and go back and fix parents who aren't willing to be fixed. If that's how we want to look at it, maybe fixed isn't the right word, but better prepare. So maybe the parents who don't show up, those kids may need extra, because you can kind of make an assumption. Maybe it's an unfair assumption, but maybe those kids need a little extra effort on showing what the impact is having on them, so they can be self-aware enough to know that that's not how they need to approach their own children in the future. And then hopefully, let's say you get 100 people. If you can get 20 of them to be different, then you're making progress, right? And it's just time.
Yeah. Yeah, and we're not saying that all parents who don't do like classes or something are like bad parents. There's
Absolutely
definitely
not.
good parents
Yeah.
out there. But yeah, this extra information I think is so helpful.
There's a large majority of parents who are doing a fabulous job
Yes.
and have done so much better than their parents have done before them. And like we said, that's the point. And we're not all at the same starting point. Some of us come from different areas, different backgrounds, all that stuff. But like, there's so much good being done by parents today. If you were to compare it to, 40 years ago, we were just in different times, different world. And like, yeah, it's cool.
Yeah. And there's so many good resources out there, like the work that Dr. Rasbury was doing,
Right.
that are being provided to a lot of families and a lot of different people. But yeah, like we just need to keep progressing with this. And this information needs to keep being disseminated throughout everyone. Like people need to be exposed to this type of information, because like in one of my classes, I was learning that the rates of moms who are poor, or like there's like a hierarchy in regards to like poverty and then like ethnicity. So if you're poor, you come from a more difficult neighborhood, your access to these resources is so much lower. And there's just that education piece that doesn't really extend all throughout. And so it's just,
Yeah.
it's challenging because we want everybody to have this kind of information and to really get the best support that they can so that they can support their child or support themselves.
Yeah. There's no doubt that like these systemic injustices play a role here, right?
100%.
You know, and we have a responsibility as a society to make sure that there's no inequality. I mean, in everything, but specifically because we're talking about this especially is important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you have a favorite piece of information or takeaway from this?
I think another thing I've been thinking about was some of the work that she did with the relaxation techniques just speaks to the power of the human mind and what you're capable of through like just those mental practices. You know, whether it be breathing techniques to go along with mental imagery. I think that stuff is so, we're just at the surface, I think, because like, I mean, we don't even understand like the full functioning makeup of like the human brain, right? So like, how can we assume to know how things are impacting it?
Yeah.
So yeah, I just think that stuff's so cool to think. And I think there's more applications that maybe could benefit from that type of technique that aren't being used now, right? Some of the work she did with lumbar punctures and what was she, bone marrow sampling or something like that, like really painful procedures where they were having to, something like that. Anyway, the fact that she could like build a rapport with these kids, figure out a story that she could paint for them, and then tell the story back to them, and they could listen, and using mental imagery, they could like work past some of the pain, and that so effectively that the doctor was in shock that the child didn't react. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that needs to be applied more into medicine.
Yeah.
Right? We need to, we're busy doing so much stuff. When I take the time to actually breathe and just stop, I love when like I'll have a training and whoever is hosting the training will like have us practice something that's like mindfulness based or some type of meditation, because I'm just like, damn, like what was I doing? Where was I in my head until I did this? And we're just so rushed and so busy that we forget that our body and our mind can like be calmed if we want it to.
Yeah.
You know, and it just takes practice, but it's something that we can consciously do.
Yeah, like the effects on just being able to like, you know, down regulate your nervous system when you take slow breaths, deep inhales, like a 7 inhale, 7 exhale for like 14 breaths. I'm sure nearly 100% of the people listening to this did not this past week take 7-second inhales with 7-second exhales for 14 breaths. I'm sure of it. There's maybe 1 or 2 people out of our massive following that we
And be
have.
like, screw you, Brennan.
But yeah, like just the power of stopping what you're doing, collecting yourself with a really intentional breath. I mean, I think intentional breathing is like so underrated.
Darth Vader.
I mean, right? Like you with that question we posed, you know, I don't know if we've even put that out yet, but I mean, you definitely wouldn't as Darth Vader, but Nick definitely takes 7-second breaths.
100%.
That was 4 seconds.
Dude, 7 seconds is pretty aggressive, but I'm down. I should probably start doing that more often.
Yeah, we all should.
Yeah. Well, this has been a good conversation.
Yeah. I would like to once again reiterate that we are not parents. and
Or experts.
or experts in this field. We are processing this information. So if you feel like you've got good resources or knowledge about this topic, please, by all means, throw us a comment or something in YouTube, Instagram, wherever, Facebook. Let us know what other good resources you think that you have that we could be enlightened to, because we'd love to learn more.
Yeah, we definitely want to know more because our conversations are pretty good. I like them, but yeah, they're not the most insightful.
Yeah, we
So,
try and go deep from a surface level understanding, and we can only go so. There's only so much depth we can achieve.
Yeah.
But there's so much to this.
so much. So thanks for stopping by. We will be posting a new interview next week. It is a fun one. It is about sports and politics. So stay tuned, and then we will do an Office Hours the week after. Hope you have a good weekend. Hope you have a good week. Thanks for stopping by. See you later.
Peace.